Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Books Weekly, my Sunday video in which I discuss books that I've either finished from the previous week or read that week or started that week. And as you might have noticed if you're following my channel, I didn't do a Books Weekly last Sunday because I was traveling and I was mainly, reading magazines and stuff that was just not worth discussing. So this is a Books Weekly for the previous 2 weeks. The first book I want to talk to you about is a non-fiction book called The Veil by Rafia Zakaria. Rafia Zakaria is a lawyer. She also writes for The Guardian. I'll put a link to her Guardian profile down below. She was born in Pakistan, but she lives in the US. And The Veil is one book in a series. I talked about that 2 weeks ago when I mentioned the book as the book that I started in the Object Lessons by Bloomsbury, in which it's a really, if you don't remember, it's a really, really fantastic series, I think. And each book in the series deals with one object, like refrigerator and the light and lightning or socks. So a really wide range of objects are discussed, and this is about the veil. It's not a very long book. They all those books are not very long. This is under 200 pages, I think 160 something, and Zakaria discusses the veil as an object from a personal point of view, because she did wear the veil at some points in her life. She includes some history of the veil. She also includes legal issues involving the veil in the United States, but also in France. The prohibition of wearing a burqa in France, for instance. So it's a mix of memories of her own experience with the veil, but also factual issues. And I found the book really very interesting. It's well written, and if you want to know more about women wearing the veil and why they do it and how the perception is, and a couple of legal issues involved. For instance, are you allowed to go to court veiled as a woman if you are to take the stand? I really enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. What you shouldn't expect is a very objective, distant discussion of this object. It is a very personal essay. It's her opinion, Zakaria's opinions, and her experiences. But still, I think it really triggers your thinking about the veil and what your own position is on it, whether women should be allowed to wear or forbidden to wear, or whether it's a good thing if they wear it. So it's more a starting point for a discussion, and that I found really interesting. So if you want to know more about this particular object, I can certainly recommend the book. The second book I want to talk to you about is fiction, but it deals with a historical subject, and that is Maria Benedict's novel The Other Einstein, published last year in 2016. Marie Benedict is also a lawyer. For some reason, I've read a lot of lawyers the past 2 weeks. She was born in Pittsburgh, and she worked as a trial lawyer for over a decade, and then she ventured into writing, and she's especially interested in unearthing the stories of women who are not in the spotlight of history, although in Marie Benedict's opinion they deserve it. And The Other Einstein is about Einstein's first wife, Mileva Maric, who was also a very gifted mathematician and physician. She was one of the first women to be allowed to study physics at Zurich University together with Einstein. That's where they met in 1897, something like that. And they became lovers, and they had a first child and daughter, and the child died, and later they got married and had 2 sons, and they separated in 1914, and then later on they divorced in 1919, and Einstein moved to the US and married Elsa, his first cousin. So that's in short the biography. But what's interesting is that there has been a lot of discussion among scholars, physics scholars, how much influence Mileva Maric had on Einstein's work, especially his famous 1905 paper on special relativity. And it's unclear because there's not much on paper left. There's only letters between the two, and the fact, of course, that Mileva Maric was herself a mathematician, and Einstein said in one of his letters, much better mathematician than he himself was, and she was also a gifted physics scholar. So it's not far-fetched to assume that in their during the course of their relationship, they discussed Einstein's work. So the novel is told from the perspective of Mileva during those crucial years when she came to Zurich, when she started to study physics, when she met Einstein, when they became lovers, and then the novel explores the idea that Mileva indeed had a lot of influence on Einstein's work. Might even be that she had some of the crucial ideas. I liked the book, first of all, because of the subject. I'm, as you might know if you're following my channel for any length of time, I am a bit of a science nerd, so I like reading about, physics and Einstein and quantum mechanics and stuff like that. But I found it especially interesting, this book, because it tries to shed light on a woman close to Einstein, and at a time where women were not allowed into the spotlight. So it's not unthinkable that Mileva did have influence on Einstein's work, but she wasn't credited for it. So I thought the book, it was well written. It did explore that theme that I found interesting. The only thing that I thought was a bit flimsy was the science side. I at points had the feeling that the author didn't really come to grips with the, Einstein's theory and how this theory of light speed being absolute was developed. But on the other hand, that also means that it's a book for people who might not be that familiar with these theories and found them maybe intimidating even. So if you want to have a story from a female perspective within the realm of science, I think it's certainly a good pick. At least I enjoyed reading it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you're interested in Mileva Maric's life and the discussion around the question whether or not she had influence on Einstein's work, there's a very good movie made of her life, a sort of mix between documentary and a movie, and it's available on YouTube, so I will leave a link to that film down below. The third book I want to talk to you about is, again, nonfiction, but this time not written by a lawyer, and that's Katherine Bouton's book, Shouting Won't Help. The book was published a couple of years ago, and it's a memoir / nonfiction book about being deaf or becoming deaf. Katherine Bouton was an editor and writer for The New Yorker and The New York Times, and she's now in her late 60s, and she started experience deafness when she was in her early 30s. So this book tells us the story about her experience becoming deaf, but it also gives a lot of factual information about hearing aids, about implants, about statistics, why people go deaf, because she tried to figure out, it was quite a sudden loss of hearing in one ear, and she could never quite figure out why and how. So it's a combination of a memoir and a non-fiction book about deafness. If you at all interested in that subject, if you maybe have people in your, in around you who are deaf or who have problems with hearing, it is certainly a very interesting and a very informative book. I thought it gave a lot of information, especially also about the fact that a lot of people hide their deafness, especially when they get a problem with their hearing when they are quite young, and how they cope, how they find ways of hiding it, and how you as a friend or as a family member should deal with it. So those parts I think are really very interesting, but I think that it might be a book, like I said, mainly for people who either have problems with hearings themselves, or who have friends or family who experience deafness or hearing loss. I'm not sure that if you're not familiar at all with the subject, that you might find it interesting, because the non-fiction part, the factual part, is quite a big part of the book. But still, I thought it was a really interesting read, and I can certainly recommend the book if you are interested in the subject of deafness. And the last book for this week is the book that I've just started, and that is Jennifer McMahon's book, The Winter People. I've came across this book by accident, as it often happens by watching BookTube. I watched Olive's a video by Olive from the book Olive, and she talked about this book, and that she found it really creepy and really spooky. And Jennifer McMahon is an American contemporary author. She writes thrillers, spooky thrillers. And I thought the story sounded interesting. A woman in 1908 murdered, and then her niece discovers letters from her and diary entries, and there's a family secret and ghosts, and I don't know, I was just in the mood for a read like that, so that's why I picked this book, and I will report back, of course, next week after I finished it. So this was it for this week's Books Weekly. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I just mention it because there may be new viewers, but you all know, please talk to me in the comments. I always love a discussion with you in the comments, and I'll see you all soon in my next video. Bye-bye.